A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is about Dunk and Egg. The humble knight and his young squire have adventures in Westeros. The show is based on books by George R.R. Martin. Season 1 is based on Book 1, The Hedge Knight, Season 2 is Book 2, The Sworn Sword, and Season 3 will be Book 3, The Mystery Knight. But the story of Dunk and Egg doesn't end there. We know more about Dunk and Egg's lives from the book The World of Ice and Fire, and from comments by author George Martin. Spoiler warning. Dunk and Egg travel all over Westeros, from Dorne to the Wall, and to cities in the east. They meet the Starks of Winterfell. They fight wars against the Blackfyres. Egg becomes king of Westeros, and Dunk joins his Kingsguard. Egg gets married and has kids, and all his kids have messy love lives. Dunk fights against Lionel Baratheon. Egg knights a young Barristan Selmy, and a young Tywin Lannister becomes Egg's cupbearer. Dunk and Egg have mysterious connections with the Lannister family. The story of Dunk and Egg ends at the tragedy of Summerhall. George Martin hasn't yet written these stories in detail. He wants to write 10 or 12 more Dunk and Egg books to tell their whole life stories. George has plans and outlines for these books, and George shared his plans with the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms showrunner Ira Parker. Ira says he wants to make 12 seasons of the TV show based on George's plans. So, what are George's plans? What happens in Dunk and Egg's lives? And what adventures will we see in future books and seasons? Dunk was born in about the year 192. That's 100 years before Game of Thrones, and 60 years after House of the Dragon. Dunk was an orphan on the streets of King's Landing. In 196, there was a war called the First Blackfyre Rebellion. Daemon Blackfyre rebelled against his half-brother King Daeron. The Blackfyres were defeated with the help of Prince Baelor, Prince Maekar, and Bloodraven. But some Blackfyres survived, and they went east with Bittersteel to plot more rebellions. Dunk became a squire for a hedge knight named Arlen. Arlen taught Dunk the values of a knight: honor, justice, protecting the innocent. For 10 years, Arlen and Dunk served lords and armies across Westeros. Then the first book, The Hedge Knight, begins. Arlen dies, and Dunk goes to a tournament. Dunk hits Prince Aerion Targaryen to protect Tansel. Dunk wins a trial by combat. Prince Baelor dies, and Dunk takes Egg as his squire. Egg is a bold, adventurous 9-year-old boy, and Egg is Prince Aegon Targaryen, son of Prince Maekar. In their travels, Egg hides his Targaryen identity and enjoys freedom from royal life. Book 2 is The Sworn Sword, and it's set about 2 years after The Hedge Knight. But Dunk and Egg had more adventures in between these 2 books. Dunk and Egg went south to Dorne. They journeyed over mountains and crossed deep deserts. Their horse Chestnut died, and Dunk dug a grave for the horse in the sand. Dunk had an incident with mad, sad Lady Vaith. Lady Vaith was probably the ex-lover of King Aegon IV. Dunk accidentally upset Vaith, and Vaith almost had Dunk and Egg killed. Dunk and Egg went downriver to Plankytown, then took a ship to Old Town. Along the way, they were attacked by Ironborn. Dunk fought them and almost died. In Old Town, Dunk and Egg visited Egg's brother Aemon. Aemon was about 12 years old at the time, studying to be a maester. Dunk, Egg, and Aemon drank fearsomely strong cider together, and Aemon gave a mule to Dunk and Egg, who they named Maester. In these travels, Dunk and Egg slept in stables, inns, and ditches. They met priests, whores, and mummers, and they saw lots of puppet shows, because Dunk hopes to reunite with the puppeteer Tansel. The books only briefly mention these adventures. They don't tell the full story. So George said he might write a book about this Dornish adventure. The Dunk and Egg series might jump around in time, non-chronologically. And Ira Parker hinted that Season 2 of the TV show might include the Dorne adventure, maybe as flashbacks. So we might see this story on screen in 2027. While Dunk and Egg were in Dorne, there was a plague in Westeros. The plague killed King Daeron and his grandson Valar. Daeron's heir, Baelor, had died in Dunk's trial, So Daeron's second son, Aerys, became king. Aerys was a weak king who faced rebellions. His Hand of the King was Bloodraven. In The Sworn Sword, Dunk and Egg serve a knight called Eustace Osgry. Eustace is in conflict with Lady Rohan Webber. Dunk ends the conflict with a trial by combat, and Dunk has a brief romance with Rohan. So that will be Season 2 of the TV show. Book 3 is The Mystery Knight, set 1 year later. Dunk is now about 20 years old in the books, and Egg is 11. Dunk and Egg go to a tournament, and they discover a rebel conspiracy. Daemon Blackfyre II tries to start a new rebellion, with the help of Lord Gorman Peake. Dunk and Egg help stop the rebellion, and Daemon is arrested by Bloodraven. We also see a young Walder Frey and a troop of toilet dwarfs. The plan is to adapt this story as Season 3 of the show in 2028. So those are the 3 published books, which will be the first 3 seasons of the show. But what are the future stories of Dunk and Egg? In The Mystery Knight, Dunk says that he and Egg will go north to Winterfell, because the north is under attack by Lord Dagon Greyjoy. Lord Baron Stark is gathering men to stop the Ironborn, and Dunk plans to join the Stark forces. George Martin started writing this northern story. It has the working title, The She-Wolves of Winterfell. George described this story at a convention. It seems that when Dunk and Egg arrive at Winterfell, Lord Beren is dying of wounds from battle. So Dunk and Egg meet Beren's family, a group of formidable northern women called the She-Wolves. These women are wives, widows, mothers, and grandmothers of the Starks, and they're in conflict, arguing over who'll be the next Stark Lord. According to the family tree, Beren's son, Donor Stark, should be the next Lord of Winterfell, but maybe Donor is too young or too weak, so someone else needs to rule for him. Or maybe there's a rival claim from another branch of House Stark. For whatever reason, there's a succession crisis at Winterfell. Dunk and Egg might be involved in trying to end this dispute. The story might also have a romance for Dunk, because in the main books, Bran Stark has a vision of Winterfell in the past. He sees a young knight who's as tall as Hodor kissing a brown-haired girl. Fans think that this tall young knight might be Dunk, and the girl might be Old Nan, the old woman who tells stories to Bran. Old Nan is Hodor's great-grandma, and Hodor is super tall, so maybe Dunk and Nan have sex, and Dunk is Hodor's great-grandpa. But Dunk doesn't stay at Winterfell, so if Dunk gets Nan pregnant, would he just leave her? Dunk never knew his parents, so in the books he wants to search for his father at the Wall. He thinks his dad might have been a criminal who was sent to the Night's Watch. So maybe while Dunk is in the north, he goes to the Wall to find his father, exploring themes of parenthood and bastardy, which would be relevant if Dunk has kids. Because even if Dunk and Nan don't hook up, George Martin has hinted that Brienne is descended from Dunk, so Dunk does have kids with someone, but as far as we know, he doesn't get married or raise his kids, so what kind of father is he? The She-Wolves story is presumably focused on the Starks choosing their next lord. After that's settled, maybe Dunk will have to fight Dagon Greyjoy and his Ironborn. George Martin had the idea for this story since at least 2006. He was contracted to publish it in 2013, but he didn't finish the story. But in 2025, George hinted that he's been working on She-Wolves again. So, the She-Wolves of Winterfell could be the next new Dunk and Egg story. It might be the 4th book and 4th season of the TV show. George has started another book called The Village Hero, set in the Riverlands. George hasn't described this story, but it might involve Otho Bracken, because the Brackens are an important house in the Riverlands, and Otho is introduced in The Hedge Knight. He's the guy who farts in the TV show. In The Sworn Sword, a character says that Otho will become the Bracken Lord, and that this will cause war with the Blackwoods. The Brackens and Blackwoods have been feuding for thousands of years, and Otho famously killed Lord Quentin Blackwood. So Bracken-Blackwood conflict could be part of the village hero. Maybe the story will reveal the mysterious origins of the feud. Dunk's mentor Arlen was from a village in the Riverlands called Pennytree, and Pennytree is in contested territory between the Brackens and Blackwoods. So maybe in the village hero, Dunk will visit Arlen's hometown. He could see the Pennytree mentioned in Season 1. Maybe Dunk will meet Arlen's sister, the mother of Arlen's old squire Roger. Dunk could learn more about the life and legacy of his father figure. Maybe Arlen is the village hero of the story's title. Egg later marries a Blackwood, Lady Betha. Betha Blackwood is described as spirited and stubborn, and she's nicknamed Black Betha for her raven dark hair and eyes. Betha is the daughter of Lord Blackwood, so she might appear in the village hero. Egg and Betha would both be teenagers at this time. Maybe Egg can begin his romance with his future wife. The Blackwoods are one of the few riverlords who worship the old gods. They have a great weirwood tree at Raventree Hall. Bloodraven's mother was a Blackwood, and that connects him to the magic of Greensight. So maybe the village hero will explore the mysteries of the old gods. George has had plans for the village hero since at least 2014, and he says he started writing his Riverland story in 2025. So the village hero might be the 5th book or 5th season of Dunk and Egg. So Ira Parker wants to make 12 seasons of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. He says he wants to make 4 or 5 seasons now, with Egg as a boy, then he wants to wait for 10 years and come back when the actors are older. They'll do more seasons with Egg in his 20s, then they'll do another 10-year gap and do the final seasons with Egg as a grown man. It's an ambitious plan, but it fits the arc of the books, because the first few Dunk and Egg books are small-scale adventures when Dunk and Egg are young and inexperienced. But 10 years later, Dunk and Egg are involved in bigger events, including politics and war. The books say that at some point, Dunk and Egg go to the Disputed Lands. The Disputed Lands are in the east, between the cities of Tyrosh Mere and Lys. These cities often hire mercenaries, or sellswords, to fight in the Disputed Lands, and it looks like Dunk will become a sellsword. Because the titles of the Dunk and Egg books all refer to Dunk's job description. In Book 1, he's a Hedge Knight. In Book 2, he's a Sworn Sword. In Book 3, he's a Mystery Knight. And George said that a future book title will be The Sellsword. So maybe Dunk will be a sellsword in the Disputed Lands. Because in Book 1, we meet Egg's evil brother Aerion. Dunk defeats Aerion, then Maekar sends Aerion to Lys. And Aerion joins a sellsword company called the Second Sons. So maybe Dunk and Egg go to the Disputed Lands and become sellswords to find Aerion. Maybe to bring him home, or to stop him from doing something stupid. At this time, there are Blackfyre rebels in the east. Their main ally is Bittersteel, the half-brother of Daemon Blackfyre I, and the half-great-uncle of Egg. And Bittersteel leads a sellsword company in the Disputed Lands called the Golden Company. So that's another reason why Dunk and Egg might go to the Disputed Lands, to investigate or to stop Bittersteel. Maybe Dunk and Egg infiltrate the Golden Company. Maybe they stop Aerion from joining the Blackfyres. Also, around this time, we know that there's a Stark in the Second Sons. Rodrik Stark, the Wandering Wolf, a son of Lord Beren from the She-Wolves story. So maybe Rodrik is in this story. This is all just speculation, but we know there'll be a sellsword story, and we know Dunk and Egg go to the Disputed Lands. So maybe they will face Aerion and Bittersteel in the east. In the books, sellswords often raise questions of loyalty and morality, and those themes are important for Dunk's journey as a Hedge Knight. The sellsword might be the 6th Dunk and Egg story. According to the history book, in the year 219, Egg was involved in a war. This was 10 years after Book 1, so Egg was 19 and Dunk was about 27. Bittersteel and Hagon Blackfyre launched the Third Blackfyre Rebellion, and the Targaryens battled the rebels. Egg showed courage, and his father Maekar showed leadership. Aerion was there, and Aerion did actions. It doesn't say if these actions were helpful or not. There was a duel between Bloodraven and Bittersteel. Haegon Blackfyre surrendered, but Haegon was treacherously killed, maybe by Aerion or by Bloodraven. Bittersteel was captured, but King Aerys spared him, and Bittersteel escaped. The book doesn't say if Dunk was involved, but you'd assume that he would be with Egg. This could be Dunk and Egg's first big battle, and it might be the first story where Egg is acting as Prince Aegon instead of hiding his identity as Egg. This story could explore Egg's relationship with Maekar and with Aerion. Was Aerion an ally now, or an enemy? The capture of Haegon and Bittersteel raises themes of mercy and morality. So the Blackfyres were defeated, and the next year, Egg married Betha Blackwood. So after proving his courage in war, Egg became a husband, and soon a father. Maybe this story is about Egg becoming a man. Aemon says that Egg was sweet and innocent, but that Egg had to kill the boy and let the man be born, to be an Aegon, not an Egg. The book doesn't say where this war happened, so for all we know, maybe it happened in the Disputed Lands. Maybe the Third Blackfyre Rebellion is part of the Sellsword book. So this could be the 6th or 7th Dunk and Egg story. The books mention another incident around this time, involving the rat, the hawk, and the pig, and Princess Aelora Targaryen. Aelora was Egg's cousin, a daughter of Prince Rhaegal.
Killed no more than Aerys or Rhaegal.
Aelora was married to her twin brother Aelor until Aelora accidentally killed Aelor in a grotesque mishap that left Aelora mad with grief. Later, there was a masked ball. People wore animal masks at this party. And there, Aelora was attacked by 3 men called the Rat, the Hawk, and the Pig. Then, Aelora committed suicide. So these events are mysterious. What happened at the ball, and who were the Rat, Hawk, and Pig? All we know is that 30 years later, the Rat, Hawk, and Pig were part of a rebellion, and they were defeated in battle. So maybe the Rat, Hawk, and Pig were outlaws or rebel lords. Maybe they were connected with the Blackfyres, because the attack on Aelora seems to have happened around the time of the Third Rebellion. Or maybe the masked ball was part of Egg and Betha's wedding or engagement. It's a mystery. But George Martin seems to have a story in mind here, involving tragedy amidst romance and war. In 221, King Aerys died, and Egg's father Maekar became king. Maekar summoned his sons to court, Daeron, Aerion, Aemon, Egg. But Aemon refused to join Maekar's council, and instead served as maester to Daeron at Dragonstone. Then Daeron died of a pox, and Aerion also died, because in a fit of drunken madness, Aerion drank wildfire, that explosive green liquid. Aerion thought this would transform him into a dragon, but it just killed him. Maybe visions or prophecies or Bloodraven led Aerion to this madness. So Maekar got the throne, but his family fell apart. What was his relationship like with Egg and Dunk? As king, Maekar was harsh and stern. His reign was mostly peaceful until the Peake Uprising. House Peake are a family in the Reach. In the first Blackfyre Rebellion, Lord Gorman Peake fought for the rebels, and it was Gorman who killed Arlen's squire Roger. Gorman Peake led the second Blackfyre Rebellion in the Mystery Night, and was killed for it, and now the Peakes rebelled again. This was in 233, when Dunk was about 41 years old, and Egg was 33. Most of our information about the uprising is from a bonus chapter published on George Martin's website. It says the Targaryens defeated the Peakes at their castle, Starpike. Egg was at this battle, and Egg had a squire named Tion Lannister. Tion was the son of Lord Gerald Lannister with his wife Rohan Webber, the same Rohan who Dunk kissed in The Sworn Sword. So it seems like Dunk and Egg are friends with Rohan's family. Since Egg had a squire, Egg must have become a knight. Maybe Egg was knighted by Dunk, even though, as far as we know, Dunk was never knighted himself. which would technically make Egg a fake knight, like Dunk. Theon Lannister had a twin brother named Tywald, and at the storming of Starpike, Tywald was mortally wounded. While Tywald was dying, Egg knighted Tywald, granting Tywald's last wish to be a knight. Also, in this battle, Egg's father, King Maekar, was killed. His head was crushed by a rock dropped from a wall, so Maekar died from a head injury, like how his brother Baelor died. Lord Robert Rain was killed in this battle, so Robert's son Roger started killing Peake prisoners for revenge, until Egg stopped him. So, even after Maekar's death, Egg chooses mercy, not vengeance. So in this war, Egg is a knight with a squire of his own, like Dunk was for him. He faces tragedy with the deaths of his father and Tywald, but he stays committed to his morals. George Martin reportedly said that he's planned a book about these events. After the death of King Maekar, the lords held a great council to choose the next king. They rejected Daeron's simple-minded daughter Vaela. They rejected Aerian's baby Maegor. Aemon couldn't be king because he was a maester. A Blackfyre called Aenys turned up, and Bloodraven treacherously killed him. The obvious choice for king was Egg, but many lords didn't trust Egg because Egg grew up traveling with Dunk, living like a weird peasant. Some lords wanted Aemon to stop being a maester and to become king, but Aemon refused. So Egg got the throne. He became King Aegon V, and a big reason why Egg was chosen is because he was supported by Lord Gerald Lannister, the husband of Dunk's crush Rohan and the father of Egg's squire Theon. Gerald used his words and his gold to convince the lords to make Egg king. So it sounds like Gerald is a friend and ally of Egg and Dunk, which is interesting because Gerald is said to be a murderer. It's rumored that Gerald killed his own brother and his own niece to take over Casterly Rock. And also, Gerald's wife Rohan, Dunk's crush, she vanished under mysterious circumstances 3 years ago. Did Gerald murder Rohan? And if Gerald is a murderer, why would Dunk and Egg be friends with him? Maybe Dunk and Egg were involved in Rohan's disappearance. Like maybe Rohan wanted to disappear. Maybe Dunk and Rohan continued their romance. We don't know the details, but it sounds like there's a story here about Dunk and Egg and Gerald and Rohan amidst the politics of Egg's rise to the throne. King Egg wanted Aemon to help him rule, but Aemon was worried that people would use Aemon against Egg politically, so Aemon joined the Night's Watch. Bloodraven had dishonorably killed Aenys Blackfyre, so as punishment, Egg sent Bloodraven to also join the Night's Watch. Or maybe Egg really sent Bloodraven north to investigate White Walkers or something, who knows. Egg sent Dunk to escort Aemon and Bloodraven to the Wall. So maybe Dunk got some wise advice from Aemon, or mystical knowledge from Bloodraven. Maybe Dunk finally met his father at the Wall. The Great Council could be the 10th Dunk and Egg book or season. Egg tried to be a good king. In his adventures with Dunk, Egg learned to respect and care for the common people. So King Egg tried to help the small folk. He gave them new rights and protections. But the lords hated this, and some of them rebelled. Egg spent much of his reign in armor, fighting rebels. In 236, the Blackfyres returned. The Fourth Blackfyre Rebellion was led by Daemon III and by Bittersteel, with the Golden Company. Dunk and King Egg battled the Blackfyres alongside Egg's 3 sons. At the Battle of Wendwater Bridge, Aegon's knights broke the Golden Company. Bittersteel fled, and Dunk killed Daemon Blackfyre III. It was a decisive Targaryen victory. Egg's army lost less than 100 men, but one of the dead was Theon Lannister, Gerald and Rohan's son, who was Egg's squire. For years, Egg's whole identity was being a squire, so how did he feel to see his squire die? At this time, Dunk was a Kingsguard knight, a sworn protector of King Egg, and eventually Dunk became Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. George said that the Kingsguard and the Lord Commander will be titles of future Dunk and Egg books, so maybe this Blackfyre Rebellion story is the Kingsguard, the 11th Dunk and Egg adventure. King Egg and Queen Betha had 5 children. Duncan, Jaehaerys, Shaera, Daeron, and Rhael. Traditionally, Targaryens marry their own siblings. The incest keeps the dragon blood pure.
The McBoyle bloodline's been pure and clean for 1,000 years.
But Egg wanted to avoid incest.
Avoid incest at all costs.
Instead, Egg and Betha arranged for their kids to marry important nobles. This would form alliances with the Baratheons, Tullys, Tyrells, and Redwynes. But Egg's children were rebellious. They wanted to marry not for politics, but for love. Egg's first son was Duncan the Small, named after Duncan the Tall. Duncan was heir to the throne, and he was betrothed to marry a daughter of Lionel Baratheon, the same Lionel who we met in Season 1, 30 years ago. Lionel was now Lord of Storm's End, and he and King Egg were close allies. This marriage would ensure the Baratheons and Targaryens would stay friends for another generation. But Duncan fell in love with another woman, named Jenny of Oldstones. Jenny was a mysterious and wild commoner who wore flowers in her hair. She lived among ruins and claimed to descend from ancient kings of the Riverlands. Jenny was friends with a woods witch, and Arya meets this witch in the main books. She's called the Ghost of Highheart. The ghost wants to hear a song about Jenny, and in Game of Thrones, Podrick sings Jenny's song. King Egg didn't want Duncan to marry Jenny. The heir to the throne shouldn't marry a wild peasant girl, but Duncan loved Jenny so much that Duncan gave up his claim to the throne and married Jenny. Duncan went from the Prince of Dragonstone to the Prince of Dragonflies. Lionel was furious that Duncan broke the betrothal with his daughter, so Lionel swore an oath of vengeance and he rebelled against King Egg, crowning himself an independent Storm King.
Fuck that, and fuck you!
Lionel's rebellion ended when Dunk defeated Lionel in single combat. 30 years ago, they danced and rode together. Now, Dunk defeated the Laughing Storm. To make up for the broken betrothal, Egg had his daughter Rhael marry Lionel's son Ormond. Ormond and Rhael's grandson was Robert Baratheon, the man who ended the Targaryen dynasty in Robert's rebellion. So Duncan and Jenny's love led to the downfall of the Targaryens. This story might be titled The Champion, because Dunk fights as King Egg's champion. Egg's second son was Jaehaerys, and Jaehaerys was in love with his sister Shaera. Egg wanted to stop the incest. He wanted Jaehaerys to marry a Tully, and Shaera to marry a Tyrell. But Jaehaerys and Shaera refused. They ran off and married each other, and Egg was forced to accept it. This ruined the potential alliances with the Tullys and Tyrells, and Jaehaerys and Shaera's son was the Mad King, Aerys Targaryen.
Avoid incest at all costs.
Jenny's witch friend, the Ghost of Highheart, made a prophecy. She said that the prince that was promised, or Azor Ahai, the hero who'll defeat the White Walkers, will be born of the line of Aerys and his sister Rhaela. Because of that prophecy, Jaehaerys made Aerys and Rhaela get married. Egg didn't support this incestuous prophecy marriage, but Aerys and Rhaela's daughter was Daenerys, and their grandson, apparently, was Jon Snow. These might be the heroes who'll save the world in the books. There are theories that this prophecy is part of why Duncan abdicated, and part of why Aemon refused the throne, why Daeron and Aerion self-destructed, and why Egg's uncle Aerys had no children. Maybe they all believed that the bloodline of Daenerys and Jon Snow must take the throne. It's just a theory, but there is definitely prophecy and mystery amidst this family drama. Egg's third son was Daeron, named after Egg's brother, Daeron the Drunken. Daeron was a splendid knight, a born soldier who loved tournaments and battle. Daeron was betrothed to marry Olenna Redwyne, a young Queen of Thorns from Game of Thrones. But Daeron refused to marry Olenna because Daeron was in love with a knight named Jeremy. Daeron and Jeremy died together in battle against the rat, the hawk, and the pig. So Egg's family is full of drama, romance, prophecy, and tragedy. His children choose love over politics, and this leads to the downfall of House Targaryen. The stories of Duncan and Jenny, Dunk and Lionel, Jaehaerys and Shaera and Daeron could be one or multiple Duncan Egg books and seasons. In 253, there was a tournament at King's Landing. Dunk was about 61 and Egg was about 53. At this tourney, a 16-year-old Barristan Selmy competed as a mystery knight. Barristan defeated Dunk the Tall and defeated Prince Duncan the Small, so King Egg knighted Barristan, and Barristan later became a legendary, famous knight. And it's funny, because if Barristan was knighted by Egg, and if Egg was knighted by Dunk, and if Dunk was never knighted, then Barristan the Bold, one of the greatest knights ever, is technically not a real knight. Dunk was Lord Commander of the Kingsguard at this time, so maybe the title of this story is The Lord Commander. While King Egg ruled, there was trouble in the Westerlands. Because Tywald and Tion Lannister had both died, Gerald's third son, Tytos, became lord, and Tytos was weak. His lords disobeyed him, leading to corruption and rebellions. The weakness of House Lannister infuriated Tytos' son, Tywin Lannister. When Tywin was 10 years old, Tytos had his daughter marry a low-ranked Frey, and Tywin got so angry that he said to have hit his father. Tytos then sent Tywin to King's Landing to be Egg's cupbearer. So young Tywin was probably close to Egg and his council for years. Egg was 52 years old at this time, and Dunk was 60. What did they think of Tywin? Even at 10 years old, Tywin was iron-willed, fearless, and hard. At court, Tywin made friends with Aerys, the future Mad King. Did Dunk and Egg see how dangerous Tywin and Aerys were? In the West, Lord Tytos failed to bring order and justice. 3 times Egg had to send knights to the Westerlands to end conflicts. Maybe Sir Dunk was part of these missions. Because of Tytos' weakness, rival houses, House Rayne and House Tarbeck, became more powerful. One time, the Tarbecks stole some land from some knights. The knights asked King Egg for help, and Egg got angry at Tytos and commanded him to deal with the problem. But Tytos failed to control the Raynes and Tarbecks, so years later, Tywin massacred the Raynes and Tarbecks, killing hundreds of civilians. They wrote a song about it, called The Rains of Castamere. So Tywin committed some of the worst atrocities in the history of Westeros, and Tywin had been close to King Egg as his cupbearer. Tywin only became lord because Tywald Lannister and Tion Lannister both died by Egg's side, and Tywin is the grandson of Dunk's crush Rohan and Egg's ally Gerald. So we don't know the full story, but Dunk and Egg are closely connected with 3 generations of Lannisters, leading to Tywin's monstrous atrocities. The reign of King Egg was difficult. Egg wanted to bring peace and justice for all, but there were so many rebellions. The Blackfyres, Lionel, the Rat, Hawk and Pig, chaos in the Westerlands, and on the Stepstones, Maelys Blackfyre and the Ninepenny Kings planned their attack. Egg came to believe that he needed the power of dragons. Dragons had been extinct for 100 years, but they still had dragon eggs. Egg got obsessed with hatching these eggs, and this dream of dragons led to tragedy at Summerhall. Aemon says that all his brothers dreamed of dragons, Daeron, Aerion, Egg, and these dreams killed them, every one. We don't know what happened at Summerhall, but it sounds like Egg gathered his family and he did a ritual to hatch dragon eggs. Egg used wildfire and pyromancers. A fire got out of control, and King Egg died, along with some of his family. The books hint that Dunk saved someone, so he might have saved Rhaella while she gave birth to Rhaegar. There are lots of theories about Summerhall, like maybe Egg deliberately sacrificed himself, or sacrificed his own family, believing it was necessary to hatch dragons for the greater good. It's like how Stannis sacrifices people to try to wake dragons in the books. Aemon says that better men than Stannis have done worse things than this. Maybe Aemon is talking about his brother Egg sacrificing people at Summerhall. As a Targaryen, Egg is connected to mystical dreams of blood and fire and destiny. But Dunk is different. Dunk is a normal guy, he's more grounded, and he's skeptical of magic and prophecy. In the Mystery Night, Egg is excited about dreams of dragons and says it'll be splendid if dragon eggs hatch. But Dunk has doubts. He asks, would it be splendid? Dunk's identity is his knighthood. He's sworn to protect the innocent. So if Egg tried to sacrifice innocent people, Dunk would try to stop him. Maybe Dunk tried to prevent Egg from doing Summerhall. Maybe after 50 years of friendship, after all their adventures, Dunk had to turn against his friend. Like when Sam has to stop Frodo at Mount Doom. At the end of their long journey, two friends struggling with power amid fire. This could bring together all the series' themes of ambition and dreams versus morals and humility. The story of Dunk and Egg ends in tragedy. The books say that Egg died at Summerhall, and the official app says that Dunk died there too. But the actor who plays Egg recently said that George said that Dunk survived Summerhall, and that does fit with Darren's dream in the show about Dunk surviving a fire. So if Dunk secretly survived, where did he go? There's one wild theory that Dunk became Cold Hands, the zombie in the books. But maybe Dunk reunited with Rohan, his old crush, who mysteriously vanished 30 years ago. Maybe in their old age, Dunk and Rohan got to be together. In the books, Brienne finds Dunk's shield on Tarth, the home of House Tarth.
Have you ever been to Tarth?
And George reportedly said that Dunk is an ancestor of Brienne of Tarth. So maybe Dunk and Nan had a daughter who married a Tarth, and now she and Dunk and Rohan and Tanzel can all live happily ever after. Like Sam in The Lord of the Rings, getting a happy family while still carrying grief from losing his friend Egg. So that's what we know about the lives of Dunk and Egg. This could be 12 or 15 books or seasons, and this is only based on the information we already have. George might have lots more plans for Dunk and Egg that he just hasn't revealed yet. This is a long, epic tale. The first few Dunk and Egg books are fun and short. They're only novellas, 30,000 words long. That's why the TV seasons are only 6 episodes of 30 minutes each. But Dunk and Egg's later adventures, with the wars and politics and deaths in fire, they might be bigger books, darker, more complex books. The TV seasons might need more and longer episodes. The story gets much more complicated, and that might be part of why the book series is unfinished. George says he wants to finish the Dunk and Egg books before the show gets past his books, but he said the same thing about the main Game of Thrones series, and those books are still unfinished. So maybe the Night of the Seven Kingdoms TV show can continue based on George's plans. And hopefully, one day, we'll get the full story of Dunk and Egg. From a humble knight and squire to a king and a champion of Westeros, ending in tragedy, in blood and fire. So those are the facts of Dunk and Egg's future, but what will these stories feel like on screen? Old SwiftX and Glidus made a video discussing each of these Dunk and Egg stories. It's 3 hours of in-depth speculation. They also made a new video chatting about House of the Dragon Season 3, and starting in June, they'll make Dragon Time, weekly discussions of each episode of Hot D3. You can watch all these videos in full exclusively on Nebula. Nebula subscribers get early access to the full version of Dragon Time, and they can listen on podcast apps using the Nebula podcast feed. Nebula is an independent, creator-owned site, and signing up helps support Alt-Shift-X. Nebula has over 70 hours of exclusive Alt and Glidus videos, and Nebula is home to other great creators, like Tom Scott and his new series, England. Abigail Thorne plays Shariko on Hot D, and Nebula has Abigail's films, Dracula's Ex-Girlfriend and The Prince. With my link, you can get 50% off an annual subscription, making the price just $30 for a year. Sign up at nebula.tv/AltShiftX to support the channel and to watch our exclusive content. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the patrons, including Stephen, Judith Teresa, Alex Delbridge, Jenny of Coldstone Creamery, Agnes, Emily Magnotta, Guy Incognito, and Nexus. Cheers.